I know, it has been a minute. It has been a while since we've done this thing, but we are back. While I was trying to deal with a lot of the reaction requests, I'm like halfway there right now. And I did not forget about this. I want to make this clear. I did not forget about this. I was just trying to make sure I got everything covered. But we're continuing with the history of Zelda. Okay? This is part 2, called the Fundamentals. The Fundamentals by TheGameDirect. Alright? Without further ado, let's have a look at this.
Super Mario, Final Fantasy, Mega Man, Metal Gear. These were some of the most influential games that dominated the 8-bit era.
Yep.
And among these amazing titles was, of course, none other than The Legend of Zelda. Though after the questionable direction Zelda 2's gameplay took, fans didn't know what to expect. And it doesn't help that there was no announcement of any new Zelda game. But little did gamers know that Miyamoto's team was quietly cooking up a sequel. When The Legend of Zelda was first introduced to the world, it was praised for its vast overworld, dungeon puzzles, item shops, and save function. All these things were spanking new back then. However, over the next few years, developers around the world started catching on. These concepts slowly became the norm, and the bar for innovation was raised once again.
Yeah.
But this should be a piece of cake for Miyamoto's creative mind, right? After all, in an interview, he did say he feels like there's no more challenge in swords and magic anymore. A bit cocky now, are we? Well, before anything, he needed to build a strong team. And over the course of about a year, the members were recruited, tripling the staff behind the original Zelda.
Good.
There was several years of hard work ahead, so the grind was just beginning. Following the financial success of the first 2 Zelda games, the team had a huge budget to work with. And with the new 8-megabit cartridge, there was potential to build an enormous adventure. The first thing Miyamoto wanted to do was to add all the ideas that was left out in the first Zelda, one of which was allowing Link to move and slash diagonally. But unfortunately, when they tried to give Link a diagonal slash, the game couldn't handle it, and instead, the trademark spin attack was added.
Oh, okay.
Old school Zelda players, do you remember the pool of water on the entrance to Dungeon 7? I'm guessing no. Well, to refresh your memory, it looked rather disappointing. So this time around, the team took full advantage of the new hardware by creating a much more realistic animation. This was among the many small improvements the team made. I mean, even composer Koji Kondo said he was most proud of the chicken noises he created. Which really goes to show the attention to detail the team put into
I
the
bet
game.
he was proud of that.
But of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. According to Miyamoto, the programmers had a very rough time integrating the barrage of ideas coming from the designers. Programmer Kazuaki Morita expands on this by stating that they struggled to compress the memory, and as a result, a number of things were left undone. One of the ideas that never made it into the game was using a lantern on a grassy area to cause an endless expanding fire, which was later added into Four Swords Adventures.
Well, okay, well at least it made it to other games.
But Miyamoto also wanted to fix some problems that the original Zelda had. One of these was, of course, the ultra-secret areas that you needed a miracle to find. At first, he wanted to simply add a hollow sound when Link poked a wall.
Right.
Realizing players could spend hours upon hours just hunting for a breakable wall, he decided to add cracks instead. Thank the goddess of Hyrule. Can you imagine?
He still did it anyway.
In April of 1991, called The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. In chronology, the plot takes place directly after the end of Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
In a timeline where Link lost to Ganon, and Ganon is sealed away along with the Triforce. Because of greed, many have attempted to break in to take the Triforce for themselves, but end up being cursed into all sorts of things.
Oh, wow.
This eventually forced the Seven Sages to seal it, until one day a dark priest invaded Hyrule in an attempt to break the seal by sacrificing some people, namely Princess Zelda. Our adventure begins as Link is woken up from Zelda's cry for help. You know, after the NES Zelda took the world by storm, followed with a complete 180-degree turn with Zelda 2, we had to ask ourselves, how good can the sequel be? Well, it turned out freaking amazing. Part of the reason why A Link to the Past was so great is because of the amount of detail the entire team put into it.
Well, yeah.
In an interview where
It was
each
great.
member was asked about what they thought was best about the game, you'd probably think of the awesome features like the light and dark worlds. But their answers were a bit surprising. For example, Miyamoto wanted players to focus on the bottle system, while Kondo wanted us to hear the noises mice made from different directions. And Soejima enjoyed the feeling of cutting through grass. Of course, most of us probably take
It's very
these
aesthetic.
aspects for granted, but it's honestly small things like these that build up the entire experience as a
Yeah.
whole. While on topic, Miyamoto busted his mind over the simple pick-up and grab mechanics. Obviously, we see these commands in every action game we play today, but back then, this was literally unheard of. At first, Miyamoto was thinking of adding a simple pop-up box, letting players to select push or pull, but ultimately decided to give the players full control with the D-pad, so that it actually felt like players were moving something. A fun fact is that the team intended to include other action commands like eat and dance, but was unfortunately too much to deal with.
Oh,
It was
damn.
out in the end, which is good. I mean, we're not playing Harvest Moon here. I can't imagine having to constantly feed Link to recharge his stamina. That'd be a pain. Now, besides all that we've talked about, the thing that really sets this game apart for me was the adventure. Miyamoto's goal with Link was to put players in his shoes, and this was the first Zelda game that really did that for me. From the fun side quests to the well-crafted dungeon puzzles, it felt, as cliche as it sounds, extremely immersive. However, according to Miyamoto, the team tried very hard to find the right balance by going through many phases with game testers.
I bet they
where the
did.
difficulty was constantly adjusted until perfection. And finally, they fixed the hint system. No more old man speaking gibberish. To put it in Tezuka's words, if you say something right out, players will catch on too fast. But if you say it in a really roundabout way, maybe they won't understand. Though I really wonder what the localization team was thinking with the original Zelda. I mean, this is hardly an English sentence. With A Link to the Past, set
Hold on, what did it
stage
say?
for future Zelda. I mean, this is hardly.
Spectacle Rock is an entrance to death. I mean, I understood that. The Spectacle Rock is an entrance to death. I can understand that.
An English sentence. With A Link to the Past,
I understand
setting
it.
the stage for future Zelda games to follow, what was in store for Link's next adventure? Well, we're gonna have to participate in a little after-school club to see. Ever since the release of the Game Boy, Takashi Tezuka has always wanted to make a Zelda game for it. Having joined the development for A Link to the Past halfway through, there were a handful of ideas he never got the chance to bring to life. So he went ahead and gathered a small team together to start tinkering, which happened every day after work, hence the After School Club, or more like the After Work Club. Since this started out as a for fun project, the team threw copyright rules out the window and started putting all sorts of characters in, We got Goombas, we got Chain Chomps, Bob-ombs, Piranha Plants, and even Kirby.
So they did that. They actually did do that on purpose. Cause I was always saying that like that looks like a Kirby. It looks like a Yoshi. It looks like a Piranha Plant. And I was like, oh. So now that is what it is. That really is Kirby. That really was a Yoshi doll.
Despite that these are all
Wow.
Nintendo characters, dev teams technically still have to ask for permission to use them. But Tezuka, he did not care. It's funny because in an interview, he goes on about how much fun the development was, as if he was making a parody of Zelda. Interesting enough, this game was simply going to be a remake of A Link to the Past, but obviously, with all these modifications, it didn't turn out that way. The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening was released in June of 1993 for the Game Boy. A remake was later released for the Game Boy Color.
And it was my most favorite Zelda game of all time. I love Link's Awakening, which is crazy to me because I still have not played the remake yet. Yes, I have not played the remake. I have to play it. I'm gonna have to play it. With that said, I have to play it. I'm gonna have to have to turn my Switch on, download it, and just play it because I love the hell out of that game. That was like, other than Pokemon, that was the first video game I ever got. The very first, other than Super Mario Brothers Deluxe. This was the very first game that I loved. I love this game.
The events in Link's Awakening carry off directly after the Oracle series.
Okay, so it's after.
Link makes his way back to Hyrule, but not without being caught in a raging storm. He eventually found himself rescued by a girl on an island called Koholint. Soon realizing he was in a mere dream world, Link sets out to recover instruments to escape the island. Twin Peaks. Ever heard of that show? I'm guessing no? Well, it's an old mystery series that was very popular back in 1990. And that's actually what inspired Link's Awakening. Well, to be more specific, Tezuka wanted to give the game the same feel as Twin Peaks. Since the show was based around mystery and drama, he wanted to make the characters in the game a little suspicious. So if you ever wondered why there are so many mysterious characters in the Zelda games you play, well, this is where it all started. Don't you sometimes just love taking a break from saving Hyrule and go for a nice round of fishing when you play your Zelda games? Yeah? Then there's one man to thank for that, and that'd be programmer Kazuaki Morita, who was responsible for programming the very first Zelda fishing game featured in Link's Awakening.
The headaches I got from this, bro. Oh my god, the headaches I got. Because you had to be precise on how to fish that out. Especially the big ones, like the really big fish. You had to really smash that A button. And then just make sure that the fish will ease on through. Like smash it and then smash it just a little bit and keep on smashing it some more to really reel it in. Like, oh my god. Like the carpal tunnel from my hands. Oh.
It seems like he doesn't only like fishing, he's actually obsessed with it. According to an interview with Iwata, Morita will make fishing games without even being asked.
Wow.
Now, as neat as all the additions are, how does the game fare? Well, for their first attempt at a handheld Zelda game, I gotta say, they did quite an awesome job. Link's Awakening felt like you were really playing a full-fledged Zelda game, despite the fact that it's operating on an old Game Boy. You'd think the world wouldn't be so big, but it's huge.
It's huge. It's huge.
Although Link is missing some of his traditional items, there are still enough to keep the game fun. And in some ways, it felt a bit like a platformer, thanks to this. Though there was one really annoying thing about this game. Every time you touch a rock without the power bracelet, an unskippable text box will pop up telling you...
Yeah, that was annoying. I ain't gonna lie, that was annoying.
Don't you think I already know Nintendo? Well, at least you can get a good laugh out of the shopkeeper, aka the toughest boss in the Zelda universe.
Yeah.
If you ever get a chance, just try stealing from this guy and see what happens.
He will shock the hell out of you.
You know,
he will shock the hell out of you, and then afterwards you will be called Thief throughout the entire game. You won't be able to rechange your name. You'll just be called Thief because you stole from him. Though I don't even know how he's able to do Kamehameha thunder shocks at you. These characters are freaking mysterious.
when you think of Nintendo, words like family-friendly, innovative, or ethics may come to mind, and just an overall positive image. Well, let me tell you something that might just change your mind. Several years after the release of A Link to the Past, Nintendo was hunting around for experts in the CD industry, and they landed on Sony.
Oh no!
Sony's agreed to develop a CD add-on for the SNES. However, Nintendo broke the contract to work with Philips shortly after.
Oh!
All this drama.
Oh god! Oh no! So that's what happened. We could have got something with Sony, but Nintendo said F that. Because I think Sony, you know what? With all this talk about Sony, I think Sony is on that sus shit. Even though it's not typically said, because every time we hear drama about Sony pairing up with another company, something's going on and they're not agreeing with each other. And they have to break ties or whatever. I don't know what is going on with the Sony dev teams. Do we need a new dev team for Sony? Like new people, period, so that we can get these deals going? Because I feel like they're being really hard-headed at times. You know, I always hear like, no, it's the other company's fault. They did that. I'm just going by on the track record. Everybody's trying to pair it with Sony, but Sony, for some reason, it just won't go. I don't know what it is. And this whole thing with Philips. There's a reason why no one talks about that company, okay?
All led to Sony to create, you guessed it, the PlayStation. So in summary, Nintendo backstabbed Sony, and yes, they were initially going to be partners.
Wow.
Now look where they are. Big-time rival companies.
Yeah.
It's karma, I tell you.
So, okay, so it was Nintendo. So we could have got a Final Fantasy-like Zelda game on the PlayStation. And I'm a PlayStation kid. So you know I'm pissed. We could have got that on the PlayStation. Come on, Nintendo. Come on.
It's karma. Seeing the failure of Sega's Mega CD, Nintendo decided to back out entirely, but not without Philips getting a hold of the license for a few Nintendo characters.
Uh-oh.
Now with Zelda in their hands, Philips gave their dev team only about $600,000 to develop 2 Zelda games within a year. And remember, this was a time when technology was expensive, where a mere 1 gigabyte hard drive cost $3,000. So $600,000 was very little to make any game. So let's see how it all turned out.
Only $600,000 for that? That is terrible. That is terrible, bro. Nintendo, y'all make so much money. Y'all were making hella money back then. You telling me Y'all couldn't offer more? What the hell were y'all doing with the money? What the hell were y'all doing with it? You know, the more we get to these stories about what could have been with these companies, the more I just shake my head. It's like, what the fuck were y'all thinking? What are y'all thinking? You sit here saying that, oh, well, we want to make money, we want to make better products. You telling me that wouldn't have made better money? You telling me a better budget game wouldn't have made better money? More money for y'all? Because y'all own the property, so it's not like you wouldn't have been missing on any dollars. It just, I'm not saying that I know everything about, you know, budgeting and marketing and business, all that shit. Before anybody in the comments says that he thinks he knows everything. I don't. But what I'm saying is, it really is depressing when you hear these stories about what could have been, and then we get this shit instead of that. It's just depressing.
Link of the hero of Corridai.
Link, the Faces of Evil in Zelda, The Wand of Gamelon was released in October of 1993 for the Philips CDI. And, for the record, Nintendo does not speak of these games. If they could, I'm sure they'd wipe it from history and our memories. The moment you begin the game, you're greeted with the cutscene, which basically tells you how much money you've just wasted. But seriously speaking, this game has the cheesiest cutscenes I've ever seen in my life. The voices are wonky, the movements are awkward, and the animations are way too inconsistent. Like, did the original artist get laid off halfway through development or something? Either that, or Zelda got some plastic surgery on her face later in the game.
Something.
Gameplay-wise, it's barely passable. The horrible controls and level layout makes it a complete chore to play. The only redeeming factor I can really think of are the detailed-looking backgrounds. And the reason behind this was because all Philips cared about was graphics, graphics, graphics.
I say it again. We could have got a Final Fantasy like Zelda, which would have been so sexy. That would have been so sexy. But instead, we got this. I have nothing to say. I have nothing. For anybody who has any explanation in Nintendo's defense as to why they chose not to pair up with Sony, speak now, forever hold your peace, because I don't get it. It's terrible. It's terrible.
The concept behind the game actually started off good, since the devs were thinking of giving it the same overhead designs as the original Zelda.
Okay.
But according to developer Dale DeSharon, he says if Philips had seen a top-down design, they would have thought it looked old and just looked at it visually, as opposed to gameplay. Well, there you have it. This is what happens when publishers care only about how good a game looks and not how it plays.
You're doing great, Link. You're our hero.
Though ironically, I don't think the game looks that great either, which is kind of sad. Anyways, so moving ahead, right when I thought the nightmare was over, Philips plans for another Zelda title. Well, third time's the charm, right? The game was released in June of 1994 for the CDI, called Zelda's Adventure.
Zelda's Adventure?
Okay.
Whoa!
Overhead view. That's a good start. What now? No way. Those, my friends, are the screen loading times.
Hello?
Probably the worst thing about this game. Music stops, everything disappears.
What is
and you're just
this?
left looking into the abyss of a photo the developer took on their vacation in Hawaii. Yeah, you heard me right. According to developer Jim, he says the background terrain textures were shot in Hawaii by me from a helicopter.
Final Fantasy Zelda game. We could have had it. A Final Fantasy Zelda game. It could have been a thing. It could have been the grand stand. And with PlayStation, oh, I know it. It could have been great. It would have been great. It would have been spectacular. I have no doubts in my mind now. Oh my gosh. I can just see it. I can see it. I can imagine it. I can visualize it in my brain. Despite it being PlayStation 1, it would have been great. It would have been great. I can feel it. I can just imagine it. The reason why I'm imagining it is because I'm trying to replace what I just saw with that. With my imagination, okay? Just take it in. Just take it in. Okay.
The team had a very small budget, so everyone's holiday pictures were fair game. This also explains why the cutscenes look like a grade 10's drama class project. Terrible use of green screens and shabby looking props.
Ganon, Lord of Darkness, had taken over Ptolemaic.
In the same interview, Jim goes on to describe how weak the CDI was, and that doing anything complicated was extremely frustrating.
Yeah, because it looks like a freaking VHS cassette.
Because of hardware and budget limitations,
VHS.
the game simply amounted to nothing.
Zelda, you've succeeded. The victory has brought peace and light back to Ptolemaic.
Thank God we got those titles over with.
The hell is Ptolemaic?
Now it's time to turn our attention back to Nintendo. Though this time, we're going to take a look at a little add-on for the Super Famicom, called the Satellaview. Nowadays, most of us take online gaming as second nature, to the point where it's almost a given that a game will have some sort of online multiplayer. If not, then at least a leaderboard. But back in the mid-90s, it was cutting-edge technology if a console could connect players across the country, let alone the world. Thanks to a satellite radio company in the mid-90s called St. Giga, theory suddenly became reality. This beefy-looking device here is called the Satellaview, and it snaps onto the bottom of the Super Famicom. It acted as sort of like a satellite modem, where players could download gaming news, game expansions, and video game remakes. Of these remakes was two Zelda games called BS Zelda no Densetsu and BS Zelda no Densetsu Kodai no Sekiban. The way these games were played was rather unorthodox. What players had to do was download them and wait for broadcast dates from St. Giga. Not only this, but there was a time limit for each session. I guess you can kind of think of it like the time limit in Majora's Mask before the moon crashes down. Though in the two BS Zelda games, it was less about the adventure, but more about your high score at the end. Upon closer look, I'm sure you guys are wondering why these games look so familiar. Well, that's because they're based on two original Zelda titles. BS Zelda no Densetsu was split into two versions, Map 1 and Map 2. The overworld is much more condensed compared to the original, due to the limited time players had. All the dungeons are reworked, but the coolest thing about this game was how St. Giga took advantage of the broadcast system.
So it was basically just a remake of the first two Zelda games. Okay.
During the gameplay, players occasionally heard an announcer hint at a heart container that just washed onto shore.
They were both just
Maybe
remakes.
they get temporary upgrades, like infinite bombs. As for the other BS Zelda title, without me telling you, it's clearly based on A Link to the Past. However, the story is completely revamped. You, the player, has come from another world and is regarded as the hero of light. You're then tasked to collect 8 stone tablets in order to defeat Ganon. This game was broadcasted for 4 days and players were required to solve 2 temples per session. Getting bored? Or maybe you got stuck? No problem. Accompanied with every cutscene are nice voiceovers, along with an epic sounding narrator throughout your adventure. On a serious note, do you guys remember how I mentioned Miyamoto initially wanted to not include cracks and breakable walls? Well, he fulfilled his goal here. Though I do find it a bit annoying having to poke around. But since the dungeons are much smaller in size, I guess it's forgivable. At least the Pegasus boots got a sweet upgrade. Unfortunately, because of the live nature of these BS Zelda titles, they cannot be replayed today in their former glory.
I bet.
Thanks to some dedicated Zelda fans, the original ROMs have been retrieved, patched, and modified in order for people to still experience the games in full today.
Wow.
Of course, without the Japanese narrators.
That would have been cool if it was the Japanese narrators.
I'm sure you guys are starting to get sick of hearing about them, right? Well, fear not, because in the next part, we'll be taking a look at how Zelda makes the jump into the 3rd dimension.
Yep.
In a very revolutionary way.
Yep.
So I'll see you guys there.
The good as hell Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. The games that everyone loves, everyone will still love to this damn day. Well, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, share the video. Let people know that I exist. And if you want more, just say so. Okay? Just think. A Final Fantasy Zelda game. Just let that sink in. Just for a second. Just for a second. Just let it sink in. Final Fantasy Zelda game. I'll see y'all later. Peace.